Alright guys, so here we are within Blender. This is what every new project is going to look like. You have your three objects here, your light, your default cube, and your camera. You can see any objects you have in your scene over in this little menu bar in the top right. And if you want to, you can switch to your camera view just by clicking this little button. We'll talk about that later. If I was to go up to render and just click render image, you'll see a quick little rendering of what that will look like with the light source, with the object portraying from the camera view. So keep that in mind. Now, some basic navigation. You guys can see what I'm doing in the bottom left here, everything I'm clicking and typing. So to do a quick little rotate, you just click in your mouse wheel and you can move your mouse left and right. If you would like to do a pan, you can hold down shift and the mouse wheel. You'll see you're only going to move left and right. So easy little pan. And if you'd like to do a zoom, you can either just use your mouse wheel to go in and out, or you can hold down control and you can hold the mouse wheel in. So pretty easy, just using the mouse wheel to rotate, holding shift to pan, or going like this to zoom. I think it's probably the easiest navigation to get the hang of. Not a lot of shortcut keys. Again, just a lot of mouse wheel. So how do we add things into this scene? Well, if you click Shift A, it's going to open up this add menu, and you can also just go in these tabs in the top left. These are pretty useful when you don't know the shortcut for something. You can go to add here and add in anything just like you were clicking Shift A. Object, a lot of the things like setting your origin, parenting, things like that are all within these menus. Same with selecting and view. So again, if you don't know the keybind shortcut for something, just look throughout these menus here. But Shift A is an easy one to remember. So Shift A, and you can add in any mesh. So any of these primitive objects here. If you want to move anything, you can click G. You can see now I'm just moving my mouse here, not holding down G, just click it once and you can move your mouse around to place this wherever you want and then click to set that in place. Very, very easy. Just remember G as in grab. Now some more transformation keys here. We talked about G for moving. You can also click S for scale. You can also click R for rotation. And if you don't want to use the shortcuts for any of these, you have these transformation little tool sets over here. So you can click and put on all of these different little axes, this little gizmo, move on different axes. You can rotate on different axes. You have your scaling tool. If you want to scale by one axis or the other, or just rotation. This is your selection tool. So you can select via box. If you click and hold, you'll see additional options, kind of like in Photoshop. So select circle and select lasso. Now let's skip over to the navigation bar here, and you're going to see a bunch of different tabs that you can go through. And I really love how Blender does it this way because it's a pretty easy, nice little color-coded way of keeping everything organized and easy to find. So starting from the top, you have your render properties, and we'll come back to this at the very end of the tutorial. I'm using Eevee right here, which gives you some really quick renderings. And again, we'll go through here and optimize this at the end. You have your output settings, which is important for setting up your resolution, your frame rates, setting up the output folder, which you're eventually going to render this out to on your computer. Very important here. You layer properties, I don't use this much. Scene properties, again, I don't use this as much as well. World properties, we'll come back to here later whenever we talk about lighting, which is good for getting realistic reflections on your 3D renders. Object properties, this is a big one here. So this contains all of the data for where this object is in your 3D space. So you can see your transform. So essentially, if you don't want to click G to move everything, if you want to be more exact, use exact values, I recommend you use the location transform properties here in the object properties. So you can take these values and move by the exact axis, so X, Y, and Z. Same with your scale. Maybe something's too big. You can type in like 0.5 here and then just copy and paste this value into each of the axes for the scale. Very, very useful for positioning. You just type 90 in there if you want like a nice right angle. So keep that in mind. Little yellow box, that's for transforming. Modifiers. This is where you can add in all your fun magic, and everything's again organized because you have all your modify modifiers, your generate modifiers, your deform modifiers, and your physic modifiers. And I'm not going to go through what every single one of these does. We will talk about some basic ones like the subdivision surface, which is very important later on. But again, we'll come back to this in a bit. You have your particle properties. That's for adding particle systems like emitters or hair. Physics. It's for adding collisions, cloth simulations, fluid simulations. You have your object constraints. which is useful for parenting, tracking. You have your object data properties, not to be confused with your object properties. The names are very similar. Sometimes I mix them up. This is useful for vertex groups, which is basically isolating a specific part of an object so that you can assign that part to something in specific later on. Shape keys, which is used for things like facial animation, and then other things like UV maps, vertex colors. I use this sometimes, but not too often. And then this one, extremely important, your material properties. This is where you can create different materials to give colors, looks, reflections onto your objects so they're not just dull and gray.